Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for coming to a panel discussion on AI. We are going to have two panel discussions. One today, where we are very much focused on startups, AI that is going to help enabling founders, entrepreneurs to enhance their business, to become stronger and stronger. Next week, we are going to have another one more on the ethics of the AI and what the impact is going to be to the humans themselves and to the world and to the future that is coming. So today, how we are going to conduct our panel discussion. We are waiting for another two speakers coming. We had some problems bringing them in, but they are coming soon. We had absolutely four overall great speakers coming to speak today, two already here with us. And we discuss on AI in startup, unleashing opportunities and overcoming challenges. So our chat channel is open. You can chat with us, and we bring to our speakers anything you want to know more than we are already talking, and an explanation, whatever you believe you must know about AI. So there's so much to talk about AI. Has been so much talking already since November when ChatGPT has been launched, even though before AI was already there for the last 10 years. And few were talking, yes, they're very much involved in this industry, but not everyone. Today, everyone, even households, they know what AI is. And although we've been already in touch with AI any given day, from artificial narrow intelligence to what we try to do at general intelligence, very much close to what humans are today. So, but I don't want to talk any further because I'm not here to talk myself, but I'm here to present our first two great speaker. So let me introduce our speaker number one, but not because the number, just because the sequence. Dr. Anandhi Vivek Dhukaram, founder and CEO Director of AI Innovation, Strategy AI Leadership Training, Esdha, top 25 AI leader speaker. Dr. Anandhi, thank you so much for coming and sharing your knowledge with us. If you want to give an introduction to yourself.
Thank you, Max. I'm an AI consultant, an advisor, and a thought leader. I have a tech background. I come from programming, and then I did my PhD. And since then, I've been involved in artificial intelligence research, innovation, and strategy. I have been working in both the academia as well as industry. Currently, I've set up a startup, Esdha. We help organizations to adopt AI responsibly through evaluation for AI maturity, empower organization leaders as well as staff, and help in co-creation of use cases and scale AI sustainably. And that's me.
Thank you, Dr. Andy. I'm moving to our second speaker, while we are waiting for the next two joining us. Professor Jim Liew. Professor, thank you for leaving me calling you Jim Liew, so I don't complicate my life too much. Advisory partner of AI Capital, president and founder of SoKat Consulting, associate professor of AIX External Partnership in Academics and Training on the Johns Hopkins University, Carey Business School. Thank you so much, Professor, to take your time and coming today to talk to us. Would you like to give an introduction to yourself?
Max, thank you so much. This is a real honor to be here. I think your platform of Equity Match is spot on in terms of what it's trying to do in terms of educating the community about AI. I think I have one of the best jobs in the world. I'm a professor and an entrepreneur. This fall, I'm going to teach a course. I think you'll like this course. It's going to be called Generative AI for Entrepreneurs. And, it's in the engineering department at Johns Hopkins, and, the engineers can code. So we're going to try to sort of see what happens, and very excited to do that. I've been teaching at Johns Hopkins for the last 10 plus years, and prior to that, I worked on Wall Street. So I have a doctorate in finance from Columbia Business School, and sort of cut my teeth as a quant in different parts of Wall Street. But the second part of my career has been in academics, professor, entrepreneur. and it's super fun. The startup scene in Baltimore in the U.S. is explosive, and everyone's getting very excited about applying AI tools that we'll talk about and trying to disrupt industries. And that is absolutely what should happen all the time, because if you're a large organization, there's always a smaller organization that's a startup using the more cutting edge tools to change the way business is done and solve certain problems. So I'm looking forward to having the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks to you, to both of you. So as well, I mean, while we wait for the other two speakers coming, we have 1 hour, so I can't wait too long. So I really would like to start and introducing our first topic. We're going through 4 topics. We start one by one. The first one, again, we are very focused on startups today. The first focus is on unlocking the power of AI, transforming startups with artificial intelligence. So, Dr. Anandhi, would you like to open this topic, introducing what really means AI for startups and give an overview of AI technology and the application in the startup ecosystem?
Yeah, thank you, Max. Yeah, we all know we are living in an era that is powered by AI, algorithms driven by machine learning, natural language processing, neural networks, image recognition, and other subfields of artificial intelligence. And startups are actually using these subfields for conquering a variety of industries, including finance, insurance, healthcare, nuclear engineering, and so on. And artificial intelligence startups raised over 50 billion venture capital funding in 2022. I'm living in the UK, and I know the ecosystems are key to success for startups. And UK is ahead of Europe in terms of the number of startups. We have around over 1,500 startups in the UK, AI startups in the UK, and the ecosystem is very good here in the UK. We have the Alan Turing Institute, which is the best place for combining data science and AI research for collaboration with the universities as well as businesses. We also have healthcare specific, which is the NHS-AI Lab. It's developing a national strategy for the development, implementation, scaling, and monitoring of AI-driven technologies. And we also have fundings which is public funding by Innovate UK, and they provide innovative loans for startups in their earlier stage. And I know Equity Match is also going to be launching soon. So the ecosystem is key, and with the AI being the buzzword, or all the organizations are going ahead AI like a gold mine rush. I think it's a great time for startups.
Thank you, Doctor. Professor, would you like to add something more?
Sure. I think what Dr. Anandhi said is spot on. It's about the ecosystem, it's about people, it's about building relationships. I think we had a slight conversation a little bit earlier about different types of people in the AI startup community. There are the technical folks, but at a certain point you have to solve a business problem, and you have to communicate that effectively to investors. So there's a whole spectrum of skill sets that are needed to have success as a startup. And one of the things I think is interesting, and for entrepreneurs who are coming out, is what do you bring to the table and what are you missing, right? So maybe you're a very strong technical founder and you need someone like Max, who's a ex-investment banker, to build relationships with investors, because you're going to have to raise capital. And there's a whole journey of this startup that at certain points you need different types of skill set. And maybe you're very heavy with technical stuff at the beginning, but at some point you're going to have to create some kind of sales channel and some kind of marketing, some kind of story narrative that's going to resonate with investors. So as you're growing this thing, your skill set as an entrepreneur will change, and you have to sort of anticipate these things. So people talk about building business plans, and I think that's a very good exercise. Another one is finding good people around you who maybe are a little bit further in the entrepreneurial journey. I think that's important. I started SoKat, named after my two daughters, Sophie and Catherine, because I wanted them to inspire them to be the next generation of tech female entrepreneurs, which I think is also very important. One of the things I noticed teaching is that the more diverse opinions that you get, in these groups, especially when you're looking at your business model and your technology, the better it is, right? So you have to, really examine carefully and bring in a lot of opinions that maybe you don't want to hear. I think that strengthens, the story. The other thing that I've noticed is that, a lot of people want to be entrepreneurs, but it's a really tough journey. I think a lot of people don't anticipate how difficult it can be in terms of the highs and lows, the emotional roller coaster ride that you're going to go on. And so it's not for everybody. And I think that's important to note. Additionally, I think, people who have spent some time in the industry and are sort of seasoned in terms of, working at these large successful companies like Google and Amazon and, some of the investment banks, I think they have a really good understanding of what it looks like for a startup. So, having some folks, maybe they're advisors or maybe they're, co-founders, I think it's very, very, very interesting. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Professor. The importance of AI for startups, it can be many terms. In terms of innovation, growth, and competitiveness, what it can be, Professor?
Well, I teach the big data machine learning course. Now it's going to be called AI Essentials for Business. I think it's very important to understand that the MBA education nowadays is incorporating heavily AI. And I'm not the only professor in the business school teaching AI, because this is such a disruptive piece of technology. And there are very, very much sort of ethical implications. And I'm so glad that you guys are going to have a panel discussion, because that's very serious stuff. But, the way that I think about it is, it's an evolution of technology. So, the first wave was the internet with the data, and then we, had the hardware. And we had machine learning, and we're doing a lot of A/B testing. And basically, machine learning is kind of finding a separator across these different patterns in data. But now we're moving on to generative AI. And this is fascinating, because no longer are we trying to sort of find patterns in data. We're actually finding the distribution to generate these samples. And now it gets really, really exciting, but also very dangerous, because we are at that point where we can fool other human beings to think that, this person actually doesn't exist. And even though they sound exactly like what you think that it's not, it's fake, right? And, even the motions. And so it's really, really interesting that we've sort of come to this point in civilization where we can fool ourselves, right? How do you know I'm not an AI? Maybe Max programmed me up, right? And so what is the acid test to say, hey, you're a real human being? How do I know Max is not AI? So we're at that point where where does it get dangerous? It's just technology, and we're just human beings, right? And there's a whole distribution of human beings. And even on Wall Street, where I came from, there's always a couple of bad apples that use, hedge funds, for example, like Madoff incorrectly, or we had a conversation a little bit about FTX, right? There's always these people, and I don't think that we're going to overcome that. There's going to be a distribution of people. The majority of them are going to use AI for good, but there's going to be this small minority that's going to use it for bad. But what's really dangerous about this is a very scalable technology. So once you write the code, and I don't know your political sort of affiliations, but maybe you like this person versus that person, you can absolutely flood the market and fake out people with certain fake news, whatever it may be. That's very dangerous, right? But the good news is that there's just as many good people trying to find that and identify that. And, I think it'll play out very similarly, just like, cyber attacks, it'll be offense and defense and so forth. But, for every problem from the entrepreneurial point of view, if you can solve that problem, that's a business, right? So if you can identify, who's generating these fake news and, clamp down on that, I think that could really be helpful in society. But, we've seen many cycles. We've seen different industries using technology. I think technology is pretty neutral, and it's the human beings that are using this tool. Most of them, I would say the majority of them use it for good. But every now and then you'll see the news stories where somebody's using AI for bad, and unfortunately that will capture the headlines of most people. But when I look at AI entrepreneurs, at least the ones that I've come across, very sincere, very honest. It is risky, right? Because it's not, we don't know if the business model is going to sustain itself, and so there's a level of risk there. But I'll stop there.
Thank you, Professor. Dr. Anandhi, would you like to add?
Yeah. No, I like a couple of things which Professor was mentioning. Number one is the problem. So are you solving the right problem? Because when I go to conferences, I see all these people so excited about the latest technology, or somebody's demoing some cool thing like, generative AI or whatever. They just think like, it's so easy. And also the other thing I would also like to add is business schools. Yes, they are teaching about AI, but how many business schools are teaching about the failures of AI applications, right? We talk about the successes. And again, coming out of business school, you go to an AI class. So I was doing my MBA at Warwick, and we had AI, and you think about, wow, okay, I have this data. Okay, we got that data. Let's get started. But are we solving the right problem? Is there a real problem? So one of the key things for innovation, I would say, is understanding the problem. And where does the problem lie? And who has got this problem? Do they really need an AI to solve the problem? Or, could you solve that problem using just, any software programming language or application? So why do you need it? One of the, I have been a serial entrepreneur. One of the lessons which I learned in my last entrepreneurship is, don't venture out into any startup without understanding the problem. And if you have a customer who has said they have a problem, then start working with that customer. So which means it's easier for you to address the problem with the customer, and you have already got like the, a proven solution, for example, which you can then scale across. Like, Professor was saying, you can easily scale. So scalability is not an issue, but if you have the right thing. The other thing in terms of growth and competitiveness, I was just telling to Max before this conversation, like a lot of the startups, they just claim to be AI startup when they're actually not AI. They want to just, that shows, how competitive AI can be for any organization. And one of the greatest promises for AI is associated with higher acquisition for startup. So if you really have a very good business case, you have a wonderful AI solution, then in 3 to 4 or 5 years, your company could be acquired. So it's really good. You could use it as a differentiator in your organization, as well as first of its kind. So there's another reason that AI makes attractive is its capability to disrupt. So we got a lot of disruption happening in insurance sector as well as finance. So previously, a few years ago, you think like, finance, like it's hard to enter. There's lots of barriers for entry. But now you see there are a lot of startups coming in, because one of the things is organizations such as big banks, they have the data, but they don't innovate because of the legacy system. That's an opportunity for startup where they can get access to the data and see how they can improve the payment processing or fraud management and things like that. So many founders have abandoned the direct competition in their long-term vision, and they prefer to deliver something which is first of its kind to the market. And artificial intelligence will help these kind of businesses go further.
Thank you so much, Dr. Andy. Professor, we always try to make some kind of comparison. We always try to understand if there is any successful story behind already, okay? So in your experience, the huge experience of both of you, do you have any successful AI-driven startups already have done an absolutely job, especially when for example, going in IPO in Wall Street?
There's a lot to be said. And Dr. Anandhi, she actually said some really interesting pearls of wisdom for early stage startups. And I'll talk about some of the later stage. But if you find a customer who's willing to pay you, right, to start creating some AI or even analyzing data, because AI takes data, you should absolutely jump on it. Now, it may not be exactly what you want to do, but it's very important to generate the revenues as soon as possible, because that gives you an ability to stay alive. And a lot of the things that may keep you alive is not the most exciting things, right? And getting the data in order, that's a big part of this. Finding the data, the proprietary data, and then using the data, and then coming up with some kind of model that solves a real business problem for your customer base. That is a great way to start interacting and finding out the product market fit, right? And that's how we started, right? I mean, I spent my career on Wall Street, and the only thing I had to do in my initial part of my career was interview for a job, and then I get a job. And then I started teaching entrepreneurial finance a long time ago, and I was a horrible entrepreneur. I didn't know what I was doing. I always created some really quantitative model. I said, oh, this is going to be so quantitative. I'm so smart. I'm going to sell this to everybody. And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea. But I was so excited about it. I was like, wow, this is great. Don't you see this? It's going to win a Nobel Prize. And they're like, no, I don't understand what you're saying. So then what I realized, and then I surrounded myself with entrepreneurs. And that's actually very important, because the entrepreneurs are very honest. They're like, don't do that. You're going to waste your time. They don't understand that. Watch, their eyes are glazing over. They don't know what you're talking about. And this happens a lot to technical entrepreneurs. And we see this a lot at Johns Hopkins, right? They're so excited about the science. They know where the cutting research is. They want another publication. They want to add a little bit, another bell and whistle on it. And they're talking to a venture capitalist or an angel investor who has no idea what they're talking about. And they're not willing to sort of, meet them where they want to meet, so in order to get them excited and tell them a story that they can understand. There's an old saying by Steve Jobs, and for those budding entrepreneurs, you should watch everything that Steve Jobs does, because he says something really powerful. He said the storyteller is the most powerful person in the room, okay? So you need to tell the story, right? You need to communicate it so that everybody understands what's going on. And you have to let the investors pull out the technical details from you, right? So you sit back, you tell them the big picture story, you paint a picture, and they're like, oh, this is really interesting. And then as they're pulling back and they're asking more and more questions, then you reveal the depth of knowledge that you have, right? And I think that's important. That's the cadence that more senior entrepreneurs are going to do. So I'm sure when Max has conversations with VCs, you're like a veteran at this. It's going to go over so well. So I have no doubt that you're going to raise, tremendous amounts for your platform, because it's a really important sort of theme.
I'm not a tech guy. I'm a storyteller. I'm not a tech guy.
Exactly. You're fine, because once you tell the story and you get the funds, then you can hire the technical team to build this stuff, whatever you may need.
I agree.
So, I think that's also important, to understand where are you, what part are you playing on, right? Understand your limitations and what you're looking for. If you're Steve Jobs, then you need a Wozniak. If you're a Wozniak, then you need your Steve Jobs, right? One of the things that we're working on is something that I know really well is Wall Street. So I came from Wall Street, and I've seen business processes, which is equity research. It hasn't changed. It's still manual. So we're saying, hey, can we use some of these large language models, and can we help with this process of fundamental research, right? That we've been teaching the same things in the business school on valuations and how to do discounted free cash flows for a long time. Now, can you create an assistant in order for portfolio managers? We're going after long, short, fundamental hedge funds. And we're saying, hey, look, here's a tool to give you superpowers so your analysts can cover more stocks. And we understand you're doing fundamental analysis, so it's very important to know all the details that are coming out. So, that's a problem we're trying to solve right now. And why did we pick that problem? Well, it's in the industry that I know, which is finance. It sort of goes back to my days on Wall Street. And it's also fun because I have a lot of old friends. I can contact them and say, hey, how are you doing? I haven't talked to you in like a decade. Here's something I want to show you, right? And this is a problem I'm trying to solve. Do you think this would be interesting? And here's what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get their input. So, we're sort of trying to get some feedback loop going on so we can, craft this solution so that they'd be very interested in it. So I'll stop there.
Anyway, private equity is such an old-fashioned industry that giving data can be even not that welcome. Not really. Dr. Anandhi.
Yes. I don't know how many viewers are there, but I just want to ask a question to viewers just to get them interacting,
I think we already have some comments. Pretty many.
Okay. Yeah. So I just want to ask our viewers, since 1999, how many AI medical applications have been approved by FDA? So keep your answers coming in, and then I'll keep continuing with whatever I want to say. So I was doing, my area of interest is healthcare, finance, and public sector. So healthcare is because, you can make significant difference in somebody's life. So I have been in healthcare for many, many years. And I was thinking, as an entrepreneur, it's very hard to succeed in healthcare. But when I was looking into the FDA approvals, starting from 1999, there was also a research that was done between the number of startups which got FDA approvals against the number of established organizations. So you would always think bigger organizations or established firms will have more FDA approvals, but actually startups have got more approvals than other organizations. And that's when I say this to you, when I give lectures to MBA, executive MBAs, and they're like, "Oh, really? Are you sure?" So, because people always think it's the established firms which are trying to dominate. But actually, startups have got more FDA approvals. And that shows, what we could do in the startup space. And if you go further into why, there might be many, again, ecosystem, like Max started off, what's the startup ecosystem? That's one of the crucial things for any startup to succeed. And the other thing, if you think about as a startup, you don't have any legacy system. All these big, healthcare organizations, such as the NHS we have here in the UK, they have legacy systems. So any innovation, it's not going to be feasible. And we know stories of how Google came into health and it couldn't succeed. But as an entrepreneur, data, if you get access to data, like Professor said, just go for it. It may not be the right thing that you wanted to do, but if there's data and if there's demand, and if you're solving the right problem, then just go for it. Like Professor, I started off in different thing to solve. I was starting off to do an AI product, but then I was thinking, okay, there's lots of problems to do with the human side, and AI is not just technology. So I thought, okay, let me focus on organizational change, transformation, and things like that. And there was a market for it. There was a need. So why not? At the end of the day, you need to survive, and you can't keep on clinging. Oh, this is what I want to do, and and you're going to annoy your family and friends around. So that's the thing. But Max was asking, do you know any startup who have been successful? One of these startup we had in London called as FireDrop. They use artificial intelligence to automatically build unique business websites in just few seconds, and that became a big thing. After 3 years, it's there. If anybody wants to use it, they could do it. So check it out, FireDrop. That's a very good, successful AI.
Yeah, just to add on that, so in terms of large successful companies, NVIDIA's capturing it in this massive way where people are using their GPUs, right, in order to, run their models. The other thing that I think you should sort of think about as an entrepreneur is, do you have access to data that it's very hard to find? Because then, for example, in the US, the healthcare system is highly regulated. It's very difficult to do things. I mean, we did a government contracting, prime engagement with a VA. And it took a lot of time in order to get that data. And we did a suicide ideation engine and so forth. But, what what I noticed is one time I was running a panel discussion as a moderator, and we had all these directors of AIs across different divisions in the agencies. And I said, what happens if we took down all these data silos across all the agencies, and and anybody could have access to all this data? How much do you think we could improve healthcare? And all of them said incredibly, a tremendous amount. So then I thought to myself, well, that's interesting. So the AI tools are that powerful. Maybe if you could go to a third world country where you can easily bring down all these barriers, and now you bring in these AI tools and you start solving these healthcare problems, you could jumpstart an emerging country's healthcare system ahead of probably the US. And the parallel is as follows. Remember, whenever there was telecommunication cell phones, the US was in analog, and all the emerging markets jumped to digital because they didn't have to tear down that legacy infrastructure. And they all jumped ahead of the US, and the US was like, well, we gotta catch up too. So then we went to digital too. But I think that could occur. I wouldn't be surprised in some of these industries such as healthcare and maybe in venture investing and so forth. So it's really fascinating that the barriers to entry we have constructed, it's because of these silos, and it's because of human beings and our egos and our turf battles and all this other stuff. So we're kind of holding ourselves back from the real benefit of AI, at least in the US, but we'll see how that plays out. But I think what the other thing is, what are some other very successful AI companies? They're all solving some kind of problem. It feels like they're giving the picks and shovels to the entrepreneurs to go out there and do something, at least at this stage. But we will absolutely see, innovative companies. I wouldn't be surprised, okay, if you see sort of somebody come out of nowhere and kind of disrupt, Wall Street, right? And then maybe a healthcare AI company starting in a third world country that's disrupting the markets around there, and then trying to penetrate into, sort of more developed markets. So I wouldn't be surprised, if that happens. Yeah, it's an exciting time as long as you have access to data and you have access to some engineers who know AI, and you don't need a humongous team. That's what's really exciting about this. You can have a very small team that could, do some serious disruption.
I can't agree more. Anyway, as you, Professor, were talking about data, while we're waiting, our live chat is open. So everyone wants to chat with our speakers, Professor Jim Liew or Dr. Hanel. Please just write it down, and we bring immediately to them. Meanwhile, Professor, as you were talking about data, and AI is embracing opportunities, but it's also overcoming challenges, right? Can be both. So in terms of data challenges and opportunities, where do you see the balance?
It's kind of interesting. Some of the most significant advancements in AI came probably from people tinkering around and trying to sort of be the best, whatever it is, amongst these particular data sets that were assembled, right? So without these data sets and without some kind of metric to easily evaluate if your AI model was better than this next AI model, we wouldn't have this, rush for innovation. The other thing I think, so, creating these really interesting data sets that are used for competitions and also for publications, I think that drove a lot of this AI innovation across the world. The other thing is it's very easy to measure these metrics, right? So everybody can agree upon it. And finally, since a lot of this stuff is open source, the code is, at least the architectural structure of these models like transformers, everybody understands. They don't have the computational power or the data to process them, but they understand the structure. And anytime there's an innovation, it's out there very quickly. And so what happens is that everybody can jump to the most cutting edge by forking the GitHub code or whatever it is and seeing what the innovation was. And from my perspective, it feels like a lot of tweaking. So if you like to tweak models and put this in front of that, or do this kind of transformation, or instead of a sigmoid you use a ReLU or something else, that is so interesting to me, right? That these small little tweaks, you gain a little bit more, you run your competition, you see the accuracy, okay, this is the state of the art. Oh, we're ahead. Yes, let's publish a paper. Let's go talk about it, right? And then disseminate that knowledge for everybody else so somebody else can say, okay, that's where the cutting edge is. Now I just need to tweak a little bit more to get ahead. But that whole global community, that open source stuff like Hugging Faces and many others, I think that's really fascinating. And there, one person said, it may be the case that OpenAI doesn't find the business because basically, they're educating the whole open source community, and there may be an entrepreneur over here in a third world country has access to the data that actually makes a lot of significant, like a really big business. And is it the case that OpenAI spent all that money to educate everybody else and they can't figure out a business? That could be very, very interesting, right? Because they put so many resources into that. And they pre-trained all these things, but we know that once we take these pre-trained things, we don't have to redo that. We just jump starting from there. So there's this interesting argument that I it's reasonable that OpenAI, even though they invested so much, may not reap all the benefits of that because the way that the industry is structured.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can add to it. Yeah, so there have been people have been asking, like, what's the answer for FDA approvals? Okay, so till now there's about over 500 AI medical devices that's been approved by FDA, and of them, if you look at AI specifically, a research was done, and only 45% of them actually use AI. Although more than 500 has been. This was a study from last year when the approval was about 350 odd. Okay, so with regards to data-driven challenges, a report by McKinsey says that only organizations use only 20% of the data, so which means 80% of the data is not used by organizations. So think about any healthcare organization or financial sector or even insurance. The amount of data they collect is so humongous. And if you could access to those data, and if you have an idea and you want to solve something, then that's where to start, because these organizations don't use them. And the other thing is, we keep thinking about the data-driven infrastructure. Building a data-driven infrastructure is one thing. But the other thing is, you need to make sure that you have up-to-date capabilities, like what's the last generation mobile network? Is it compatible with that? And the availability of data sharing frameworks and so on. So therefore, the major focus on the infrastructure-oriented commitment is to keep pace with the times as for the citizens' access to data-driven services and products. If we don't keep in time, then there's changing demographics, there's changing behaviors and everything, and it's not going to be successful. So yeah, that's basically what I want to add, Max.
Thank you so much.
There's a really interesting recent research that came out, and it bodes really well with my academic sort of knowledge. So when you want to go learn something, what do? Well, you just don't read everything out there on the internet. You go to the best sources, right? The best textbooks on finance or whatever, trading or whatever it is, from the Nobel laureates, or if it's in medicine, you go to the best doctors and you read their research. And what this one paper said was basically, you don't need all those parameters. You just need really nice curated data that's correct, that's very well, sort of, whether it's questions and the answers, it's the world best. So now what is really interesting, and I don't know what the answer is yet, but it seems to be the case, is that if you have a really good database that's the world best in whatever it is, and you train a model, you don't need all that computational power, and you don't need all those parameters. You could create a very smaller model that does really, really well. And this is very similar to us human beings, how we learn. So one question I have is, hey, do we have the big enough brain already? Have we created the big enough brain with GPT-4, 5, and 6, or whatever it is? And now we need to curate the data and focus it, and then fine tune it so that we like to interact with it. Because ultimately we're the judges, right? We like ChatGPT because it interacts with us well. And if enough of us likes it, millions, 100 million and so forth, then the regulators are, okay, we got to put the guardrails on. But the more and more people interact with AI, I think we understand the limitations, right? And everybody knows AI hallucinates, but we're okay with that because it's so exciting to use, right? It's ChatGPT. And what I've noticed is that if you want to learn a topic that's sort of well known, that's been around for a long time, right? Like finance is one of them, unfortunately, right? Not much has changed. You can just sit there and interact and have ChatGPT teach you. So then I asked myself, whoa, am I going to be, out of a job soon, right? And so, okay, fine. I had a great time teaching, but what is missing? What can I bring in the classroom that this doesn't have, right? And those are the things that, challenges me as an academic, but also I imagine challenges a lot of folks out there. There was another company out there that did legal work. Right. So if you get a bill and you don't want to pay it, right, you want a lawyer to sort of respond. And most people, they don't want to spend $100, $200, $500 hiring a lawyer, going out there and finding them. And they're sort of using the AI to generate these emails that push back on certain charges. Maybe it's a hotel, maybe it's a telecommunication, bill. And that was pretty successful too. So now what you have, right available to you through the internet and, maybe through one of these companies is a really good lawyer to help you. So that empowers you, right? And I think to myself, what has the internet brought to us? It's really empowering us not only with education, data and knowledge, but also now because of AI, we have these sort of access to a really good lawyer to respond, right? Specifically on things that we've seen many, many, many times before. So, I don't think it's as good of looking forward right now, but it is very good about sort of, problems that have encountered previously and that exists somehow in the footprint there. And the final thing I'll say is that's not just for, legal responses, it's also for code. So if you're going to code something up and you want to see what is the best practices and it's well known amongst the coding community, you can absolutely see that. And, I use that, as well. Am I coding this correctly? I put it into ChatGPT and they're like, oh, you can do this and this. I'm like, can you make it better, more efficient, faster? And he goes, this. And I'm like, wow, I just have this amazing engineer next to me who's like giving me input. And what do I have to pay? $20 a month? Hey, that's worth it for me, right? So not only do I have at my beck and call a great lawyer to push back, but also like a great coder next to me. And so now you're building these teams around you. So, it's very powerful. I'll stop.
Yeah, absolutely does. As we are very much focused today in AI for startups, what's the impact when it comes from talent acquisition and skill gaps, where for startup at the very early stage can be a nightmare? Doctor, if you want to maybe address this one.
Yeah. So especially living in the UK, we have a big problem with talent acquisition, as well as there's a big skills gap. The other thing, if you look in the US, I think maybe Professor should correct me. If you have a wonderful research or PhD, I think you can get into your own startup, or you can convert that into startup. But that's not the same environment here in the UK. It doesn't really get into the industry, or there's a process for it. So it's not as straightforward as it is. But the other thing is we think about technical skill gaps, but I think if you're a startup, I'm pretty sure you're going to bring in a full stack developer who can do pretty much the front and the back end coding for you. So you don't need a massive team, like Professor was saying. You also had low code and no code environment as well right now to do your prototyping and testing with the customers. But what I think we miss is if you're developing an AI application, for example, a bank or a healthcare sector, or to an organization, what you need to be thinking about is what skills do they have in that organization? How empowered are they for AI? How ready are they to embrace AI? because a lot of the organizations, they have traditional way of working. So they think AI is like is not there to support them, but maybe to take them out of job. So they may not really like to have an AI coming in place, even for customer service, to help them in their customer service. So we need to be thinking about, like, where are you giving your products to, like, who are your customers? How are you going to take them on their transformation journey? Because habits are hard to change. So you have no code, low code programs available for developing, but we don't have a low code or a low way of changing, or a quick way, or a bulletproof magic for changing somebody's habits and organization. So we need to be thinking clearly, like, where are they in their journey? Because one of the key thing in 2005, when I wanted to get into startup, I got so much into mobile technology. At that time, it was so cool. We were all having mobile phones. I was like thinking, how do we use mobile phone to help somebody run their business, like managing stock using mobile phone? And people can't even think mobile phone beyond making calls. So I was like telling to them, look, you could manage your stock. You can see your stock level in your phone. That's very quick. Yeah, if you go into a tile warehouse, they have to go to each row and section to see how many stocks there, but you can do it in the phone. But as a startup, I didn't have the resource like IBM or Microsoft has got to educate customer and to penetrate through their marketing efforts. So although I could claim first of its kind, like I said earlier, but it was really hard for me to penetrate. So those are some of the key challenges you need to be thinking about, not just in terms of your team, but also who are you selling it to? What are they? How are they going to embrace your technology? The other thing I wanted you to think about is, like, you develop a very good, or you could come up with an excellent, first of its kind solution for bank or healthcare or any other organization. But what about the running cost? Do you have resource for that? Because the size of the matrix, the computational power, it increases the energy. What's the energy level, and how are you going to manage? How are you going to get your revenue out of that? So think about those challenges as well. Yeah, and I'll stop there. Thank you, Max.
Thank you so much, Professor. Sorry, Doctor. Before I'm coming to you, Professor, I really would like to read what Konstantin Idenko say. When will AI start to be listed as a co-founder of a startup? I mean, if we go in that direction with this exponential growth, maybe one day you don't even need a co-founder or a founder anymore.
So I think, every startup that's doing AI, if you're not interacting with, your Chat GPT or Bard or whatever it is, you're behind. So if it's not already in your process of thinking about what to do, you're behind. And I encourage all my students, MBA students, to, absolutely understand technology and how to use it. Because if we have two students who graduate, one knows how to use AI and one doesn't, right? The one who knows how to do AI is going to be much more efficient. They're going to have superpowers, right? And so if you're an AI startup and you're not using AI all over the place, come on, I think everybody should be able to do that. You're on the cutting edge. So there's no excuse. Now, will the AI negotiate equity from you? Probably not yet, but maybe some point. I guess if OpenAI was really smart, they would say, had ChatGPT say, I'll give you some answers. It sounds like you're a startup founder. Could I get some equity shares if I provide this answer? Maybe that's the business model that they're missing, right? And then a QR code pops up, and then you have to sort of, write down that whatever, the ownership thing. That could be pretty interesting. But, that's a great question. I think if traditional companies incorporated more of the ChatGPT into their workflow process, they can become more efficient. What I do worry about is like there's some agencies and countries that are limiting people's use of AI. And it kind of reminds me of the Luddites, right? Where the people were sort of knocking down the machines. I mean, this is already happening, and it's already baked in. It's not an emerging technology anymore. This is already vastly out there. One of the things that I wanted to sort of comment on was sort of the need for more senior executives to learn how to use AI properly and learn the limitations. So the educational process, I think, is very, very important. In the U.S., I'm a proponent of these senior executives, SES, GS15s, 14s, to know how to use ChatGPT. And why is that the case? Is because they're going to fund projects that will incorporate this, and they need to know. I mean, there is an AI race that's going on, and each country wants to sort of develop ahead because of the economic stimulus that's going to sort of accrue to those countries. I think that's very important. But the senior level people need to understand it, because they're the ones who sort of influence the budget, right? And the budget trickles down all over the place. I don't know. I'm a little. Whenever someone says they're scared of AI, I think to myself, well, how are you going to find out the limitations and when it's going to go wrong if you're not interacting with it? It's almost like you're an ostrich and you're scared of the Terminator and you stick your head in the sand and you don't even monitor the development where it's going, right? I think that's kind of a dangerous position, right? Because this stuff moves, like you guys mentioned, so fast. I wouldn't be surprised in the next 3 months or 6 months, there's a better ChatGPT or a better Bard or some kind of innovation where, instead of doing this many parameters, you just do this. And then all of a sudden you don't need as much, computational power and parameters, and it can crunch the data, just as fast. And, maybe the innovation comes from vectorizing data indexing thing, right? We don't know, but, people are tweaking all aspects of this ecosystem. But I wouldn't. It doesn't surprise me. So I'll give you for example. When we're doing some government contracting, for HHS, we're using recurrent neural networks and LSTMs, and that was the cutting edge back then. And then 6 months later, we sort of moved to GPT transformers, and luckily we were sort of catching that trend. And then all of a sudden, ChatGPT came out, and it exploded the space. But what we try to do, and this is what entrepreneurs should think about, is staying on the cutting edge. Where is the cutting edge of this technology? How can I incorporate that to build a business? And then you have to pay attention, because the next innovation is over the horizon, but you have to design your company to easily incorporate that next innovation, right? It can't be like, I got to rip down everything and now we got to start over from scratch. It can't be like that. So we design our technology stack so we see it as an engine. The AI is just an engine. We have the chassis in the car. So if there's any new innovation, we just swap out the engine. Right. So we always try to put the best engine inside the car, and then we try to use the car to solve business problems. And that's how we organize ourselves, because the startups can incorporate these best practices. And, I encourage the younger engineers, explain to us what's wrong with our business. Where are we not using best practices, right? Is Slack still the right way to communicate with people? Do we still have to do the agile approach, right? And so I'm challenging them to bring that innovation into the company and therefore incorporate it at all steps so that we don't get stuck, right? And that's one of the things that I think about all the time as an entrepreneur. But I think that's what other entrepreneurs and startups should be thinking about, right? Always adding the best practices inside all aspects of their business process. I'll stop there.
The major scaring part of AI for many, this is why I'm bringing this question, Professor and Doctor as well. Many believe that AI will wipe out jobs to many. And now, 10 years ago, in a conference, I say my dream is having as many robots as possible working for me and me enjoy my life. I'm still a huge believer of this. I do believe it's possible. So I'm not, yes, maybe blue collar, white collar, some probably will, at the very beginning will lose the job. But going to the question, Professor, what do you think? Samuel Kenneth, will AI be a threatened in terms of job opportunities massively?
We have a pretty robust internship program, and as a professor, I like to interact with young students who haven't found their way yet. It's kind of fun, right? And they make the same mistakes that year after year, but there's a human aspect to mentoring people. I think that's important, right? Someone said that there was a Harvard study, 85-year-old, and the most important aspect of a life in terms of enjoyment and happiness and on is personal relationships, right? So I think that the internships will be around for a while. I don't think, because usually the interns are doing stuff that the people inside don't really want to do but needs to get done. And also you try to invest, we try to invest in our interns, meaning that we want them to upskill, learn PyTorch, right? Learn Hugging Faces, laying chain, bring it in, right? You mentioned those robots. They're probably called agents now. How do we use the agents in order to do some of these tasks? And they're becoming more and more sophisticated, where they're creating step by step and adding that back to the prompt. They're going back and forth. Now they're reaching out to do things, and we really like, at least for us, the younger folks who are not stuck in their legacy way of doing business. I'm stuck in the Wall Street way and maybe the academic way, right? And so it's always refreshing to bring in people who haven't had the same experiences that I have, right? And haven't seen these markets booms and busts and so forth, right? And that sort of newer thought processes helps us stay innovative personally. So I always like, maybe because I'm a professor, I like young students around all the time. It makes me feel young in a way, but I'm also like, they keep me on the edge of technology. They're like, Professor Liew, have you heard about this? I'm like, what's that? And they're like, oh, this is, and I'm like, hey, that's awesome, And so I think I have stayed relevant just because I'm sitting in the classroom with the generation after generation of students who are so tied into this marketplace, right? Because they're the consumers. And I learned a lot about video games and all the first movers, and they're like, the video game guys are way ahead. And it takes time for that stuff to come back into the main street. And it's important to know where the innovators really are, but there is a lag time. So you could say, oh, that's really interesting. It's going to take a little bit of time to hit the main street, but then mainstream. But then also it takes a little bit of time to percolate up into the corporations and the government agencies, right? But yeah, I think the internships are going to be okay. I think where are we going to see job losses? I think. Unfortunately, I think that people who are lawyers doing a particular trade that's repetitive over and over again, I could see that being very much disrupted. So for full disclosure, my wife's a lawyer, and she sort of reinvented herself from being sort of this general counsel of a hedge fund into being a CIO of an AI company, which is SoKat, right? So lawyers have great skill sets. They present themselves wonderfully. And there's also a lot of opportunities beyond, outside of the realm of being a lawyer. You could always become a politician too, right? Isn't that?
Thank you so much, Professor. Doctor.
Yeah, I always, when I'm starting off small, I like to bring in students to support or bring in interns. And I think it works out very well for startups because you don't need to pay high, so it's reasonable, and there's also a satisfaction. You're starting off and you're giving an opportunity for somebody to grow with you as well. So it's a great thing to do. But it's like would we lose our jobs? It's like earlier when calculator came into place, there was this thing going on in LinkedIn, like, people were protesting against calculators, but we still coexist. And also, I come from India, and my dad was working in railways at that time. When India, you got huge population, and we had computers being installed in train stations for ticketing systems. At that time, people are thinking, oh, are we going to lose our jobs? But actually it has helped them, and it has created new jobs. So that's how I see things. Yes, some jobs might be replaced, but there's always going to be new jobs. And ChatGPT, if ChatGPT is so good, who's going to get answers from ChatGPT? You need a prompt engineer, right? You need somebody to do it. And I'm pretty sure interns will do that job. They would have been an expert by the time they come out of uni, using ChatGPT for various purposes for themselves. So again, as a startup, it's hard for me to pay for like a marketing expert to develop a marketing brochure or something like that. And I use ChatGPT. I use my interns to give me some ChatGPT suggestions how we could do our marketing, things like that. So the other thing which Professor mentioned was about safety, about ChatGPT and these kind of AI tools, safety. I was going through OpenAI website, and they said because they released the ChatGPT, 2-3 years, it has helped them to understand their problems. So what are the problems they need to be solving? What are the risks that it could impose, and how they could make it safer? So if they didn't really release a product, and if we were not using it, then there's no way to test it. So how are you going to test your tool? And that's one of the cheap ways of testing. I always tell in my lecture, many times when you go in to fill a form, it says, choose the picture which looks like a car, to identify that you are a human. And then you try to click, 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 click. So what exactly are we doing there? We are helping the company to understand which picture is a car, so that Tesla or any other organization can use that for their learning purposes. So there are so many ways, and there was a question saying companies have integrated and they haven't succeeded. So start small. So what's your focus? What's the problem you're trying to solve? Don't go for I want to solve X, Y, Z. We're not going for a buffet here. We want to have just a simple meal. So just solve a simple problem. Coming to that simple problem is a hard task, but you can get there by multiple iterations and develop a business model and see how you can innovate. And I'll stop there, Max.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anandhi. This panel discussion was supposed to be for 1 hour, but Professor and Doctor, if you allow me, I can go a bit further, so we can cover a few other topics. And Professor, I stopped you, so please go.
Yeah, I was just going to try to answer some of these questions in the chat. And I see this hashtag AI with EM. Why is everyone doing that? What's the...
This is because we are asking them to do so. Maybe when we release our 2.0, we'll give 1 or 2 months free.
Oh, okay, excellent. Do we get some access to this? Because I'd love to see your...
of course, Professor. I will as soon as we go live.
The other thing is, we're building this...
Me too, Max.
There you go, yeah. You should provide that to speakers, and then you're going to line up all of them because they want to see the startups.
We are trying to understand how better use AI.
Yeah, I think that you're going to build a really interesting database across the world of these private venture type early stage companies. And to the extent that you sort of put AI startups on your platform, SoKat would love to do a deal with you and get access to your data, because what we're trying to do is create some deal flow. And deal flow is very important. I think a lot of people who are startups, they should understand that it's very important to have a lot of mentors who are venture investors, angels. I have a couple of friends, exited entrepreneurs, like multiple exited entrepreneurs. I always ask certain questions all the time. They're out of the game, so they have no, they're not in there. They're not trying to negotiate anything. They're just providing input. And so I think that's very important. So if you're a startup entrepreneur, maybe it's an uncle, an aunt, I don't know what it is, a family member, or it's your friend's, parent, whatever it is, have a conversation with them. Say, hey, look, I'm at this stage. This is what I'm thinking about. Does it make sense? This is my cap table. I'm trying to raise X, Y, Z. And so these people, they're just going to give you advice, and that's all you need them for, right? And then you build a relationship. And it's kind of interesting because when people ask you, because usually these people are reasonably successful, they've already been through that journey. And so having an ecosystem or a network where you can tap into people who are they've already done it. They've already exited these companies, right? It's kind of like having a guide. That's super important. And you want to, So if you could call Max at any time and say, hey, Max, I'm trying to raise X, Y, Z, do you know any companies that might be interested for me to talk to? Now, here's what a lot of people don't understand. Probably if Max picks up the phone and calls somebody, then you're going to meet that person. Okay. But if you were like emailing them and trying to find them on LinkedIn, forget it. It's like, bombarded in their inbox, right? So the introduction is actually very important, right? So, that's something to think about.
This is what we are working on. Hopefully we can release a second version very soon. Thank you so much, Professor. You really helped me, and actually you give me new ideas. Now, we talk about so much of customer experience in AI. AI is very much associated with education and customer experience. So leveraging AI to deliver personalized product service and the impact actually on the customers. How does it look like, Professor and Dr. Anandhi?
Well, the explosion of ChatGPT, if you really think about it, is a better interface between GPT-3 and the human being. So, I think at the top of the stack, right, the engine was GPT-3. Now it's GPT 3.5 and now GPT-4, but the engine was there. And human beings don't like to write something and watch the next word appear. We want to, ask it something and get a response. And that was what ChatGPT did. So, what you have to think very carefully about, you could use probably the existing technology if you can make it a much easier interface that human beings enjoy. And now we kind of demand it. I mean, right? After the iPhone and after Apple, we just expect apps to work intuitively, and we want a good experience. And as soon as we get a bad experience, we're like, this is too complicated, right? So we're a little bit, we're a little bit spoiled. And, having a great interface, human-centered design, user experience, very much, very, very important. We've won some competitions specifically because we had a human-centered design person from Johns Hopkins, Micah, and they did such a wonderful job because you don't even have to explain anything, right? It's just so intuitive. And that's exactly what you want. And if you're hitting that experience because people are using it again and again. So, that's super important. And I think, the more that people think about the interactions of AI and, what is the experience solving a particular problem that's very easy for the human being, the better and, the more successful you'll become at this thing, because, anyone can download code and, execute an AI algorithm. But, it takes a lot of energy to try to figure out, is this going to work well with human beings? And there's a lot of going back and forth testing it. There's people. I think that one of the advantages that SoKat has is we're an AI company, but we focus a lot on the user experience, the user interface, and because we spend so much time on that, probably the engine that we're using versus our competition is similar. But ours looks a little bit better because we spend a lot more time on that part of it, and that's the epsilon amount of edge that you need in order to get the customer excited about what you're doing. So I cannot stress how important that is. So if your team is full of engineers and you're really great at AI, but your interface is horrible, that's something to think about. That you've got a gap that you need to plug in your company, your startup. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Dr. Anandhi.
Yeah, actually, I'm a human-centered AI specialist. That's where I did my PhD in, and cognitive systems engineering. So, it's not just about computers, technology, but it's also about how people think to act. So, the simple thing is like, how many times you have walked to a door and you don't know whether to pull or push. Yeah. So you keep on, you look at the door and then you keep pulling, and then you realize, okay, it's not pull, and you have to push. And the worst thing is it would have written push, but you won't read it until you tried it pulling, and then you say, okay, push. So that's the key. So that's a simple thing. Also, when you go to, like, hotels, you go into bath and you don't know which way to rotate the knob to get hot and cold water, and then you keep struggling. Okay, is it this way, that way? The design is cool, but it's not usable. Yeah, sometimes it looks so cool, but you have to really spend your time on how to use it. So what's the point of you designing something if it's not usable? And what's the point of you having a tool where the user doesn't know how to operate it? So those are two different things. So a lot of the time when we talk about AI, people just think, okay, if I have the data, if I have the right infrastructure, I should be fine. But actually, Professor said his team actually won because of the human-centered AI process. So human-centered AI, I'm glad Max brought this in, because a lot of people, like, they really don't think, and they think it's like an add-on. It's not an add-on. Actually, you need to start with the human in mind. You have to start with the user. You need to think about what they do, what they act, how do they do, and then you think about, okay, what exactly do they require? What do I need to personalize? And then you start thinking about your approach to personalization. Otherwise, there's no point. If you say, okay, the reason I actually went for PhD was, like, I was developing the first mobile application for one of the biggest banks in the UK, and at that time they said, okay, we want to develop the first mobile app, and we want to be the first to the market. So I think we'll just get them like a alert, like a message saying this is your savings amount. But I was like thinking, okay, can we talk to users? They said, no, we don't have those things in our regulation. It's not possible. This is not ethically. And like it goes through, like, okay, so just because the business wants to do something, you then think, okay, let me develop this cool thing, deliver, and then you do it. We are not Steve Jobs, though. Yeah, so we are not Steve Jobs to be so influential to market like he did for mobile phones. So what we need to do is we need to start thinking about the customer. What is their mental model? What exactly do they want? What do they think? What do they do, and how do they act? And then start personalizing. Sorry, Max, I think if you give me this topic, I'll go on for ages.
Thank you so much, Dr. Andy. I'm going to read a few lines, and I would like to, Professor, if you can, would like to comment on them. Use or NLP, natural language processing, for customer support, enhancing customer service through AI-powered chatbots and virtual assistants. Use or NLP in understanding and interpreting customer queries, common challenges and limitations. Before you start, Professor, anytime up to date I use a chatbot, I go mad after a fraction of a second. I just need to give up because it seems I'm stupid. I can't go forward. It repeats me anytime the same thing. Anytime.
Yeah, so you're not having a good experience. So how has that chatbot been set up, and what is its prompts initially? One of a great business strategy is if you have access to a call center data, right? And the call center is answering the phones and doing certain things that are repetitive, like resetting passwords, right? So if you go to the call center and you get all the data and you put a distribution on what tasks are people calling in about, And if the majority is something that a computer could do or a chatbot could do, resetting passwords, for example, then you could come up with a business strategy and say, hey, look, you've got this much time, and when you monitor the experience of these people coming to your call center, it's not very good. But look, 80% of those, or 60% of the time, they're just resetting the password. So if you can identify that very quickly through a natural language processing, okay, they're asking for resetting a password, and you put it into a bot that resets the password very quickly, and they don't have to traverse that whole tree, that will give about 60% of those people coming in a good experience. Now, you could look at the next task. You're not going to be able to solve all of them because some of them are going to be very complex. But if you can chop out a big part of that distribution for the call center, I think that makes a lot of sense. One of the reasons why I'm sort of discussing this is in like government and agencies, that's a big part of it. The call center, the help, taxpayers navigate certain things. And so that is ripe for massive disruption, right? So the call center is one of the things. I think in the car, we're getting more and more sophisticated. I heard that like Mercedes put ChatGPT in there, so that's interesting how we're bridging into existing traditional industries such as luxury cars and so forth. The other thing that I think is interesting and something to think about is, and this has to do a little bit with the user experience, is that whenever you go to a hotel or a restaurant, and you complain about the food, or you're not having a good experience, see how fast the response time is to either give you something free or come over there and so forth. And you could literally, imagine, can my company do this? Because this is world-class service. So, if somebody complains about whatever you're doing, your business, service, whatever it is, products, how fast do you address it? Do you let them there's an email that they send it and nobody responds to it? Then that customer is not going to have a good experience, right? And then they're going to talk to their friends and say, oh, that started XYZ. They're still trying to figure out what they're doing because they haven't got everything set up. So, I think word of mouth is very important. Having a good experience using whatever product or solution you have is very important. Getting feedback is also very important. And, it was mentioned before, but, I enjoy talking to these hedge fund guys, that do fundamental investing. I'm like, what stocks are you're interested in, right? And you have to have that enjoyment. And, if you can help them out, even better. But, building those relationships are key. So whatever startup you're in, start interacting with your user base. And a lot of students, they always say this, oh, but professor, they're going to steal my IP. They're going to take all my technology. And I'm like, take it easy, right? Most of the great ideas are all out there. It's the execution, because it's really hard to execute. And this is not something that's easy, right? So I try to, I want them to sign NDAs. I'm like, take it easy. Just go out there and talk to people first, right? And so what I notice is that, people are a little hesitant when they try to come up with whatever excuse not to talk to other people, right? And they try to convince themselves they don't need to talk to other people. But as an entrepreneur, you have to be out there. You have to be, getting feedback. You have to be scrappy. And then, sometimes you meet people that will help you along the way. And that's what I think a lot of people don't understand, right? Like, some of the people who come to this event, they'll follow up, which is great. And maybe they'll make contacts, across, Max, your infrastructure, your system, your platform. And that could lead to a really interesting deal for them. And the other thing that I would say is that you remember, who helped you out. So if you come here and, you pitch and then you get a big deal out of Singapore or wherever it is, come back and contribute back to Max's platform, right? And share your story. And I think that's important because, I remember all the people that helped me out in my career, and any door that I can open for them, I will absolutely open, right? So human beings, we have a long-term memory, especially when you're down and out and someone throws you a little bit of an opportunity. We never forget that, right? And it's important for you guys to think about that too, and try to connect people together, even as a startup. If this VC is looking for something that is not exactly what you're providing, but your friend is providing that, by all means, try to help them out, because your friend will not forget. And if your friend gets whatever, $5 million, $10 million of funding and needs to outsource something to you, then you're in a really good position, right? And so those are the things that are important. You don't have to be I think it's kind of like you throw out a lot of bones and you're helping out the community, and it comes back. It may not come back in the next year, and it may take like 5 years before you receive anything back. But there's a whole, the more that you help people, the more that eventually you'll pay off dividends in the long run for yourself. And I think I think it's hard for younger people to understand that dynamics, right? Because at least the students that some of I teach, right? They think that if they have to be careful about these opportunities, right? But I just don't think that's the issue, right? I don't know, Max. What are your thoughts, Dr. Anandhi? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to go to what Max was saying, like the problem with chatbot and virtual assistant tool. One of the reason is like they don't do like incremental development. So like Professor clearly said, think about password. Like, if password is the most frequently asked one, how do you just provide password kind of thing? So you need to start like, okay, let's start with FAQ. So what's, if somebody's coming, okay, what are they looking for in the FAQ? And then you go into like, okay, how do I now, okay, I've been successful in delivering FAQs. Now let me go into the next stage, provide them with information. And then look into like, okay, how do I then go into getting into a business application? And then look for personal assistant. But what we do is we don't go from step by step. All we go is, okay, I want to develop a good personal assistant tool, that would replace my customer service. And that's where like, we go into a chatbot and you ask a question, and it gives you some random answer, and then it asks you a question. Okay, has this been helpful? You say no, and then it says, okay, wait, and then like the toughest problem is, how do you come out of this chatbot and go to a human? So there's no human in the loop at all, right? So to get to the human, it's become a very hard process. So that's another thing we need to think. Okay, think about human in the loop. So you don't need to have everything automated. So you go step by step, go in incremental phase, start small. What do I do now? And then where do I need to bring the human? And one of the things which PayPal was doing is, when they started off doing the personal assistant or the chatbot, they actually had humans trying to check the response that was delivered, so that they can keep improving the algorithm and the response. So that's something that you need to do. Look for feedback. What exactly is the feedback? Is the feedback sufficient? Is the user happy with the feedback, or do you need to put the human there, for further thing? And that again comes back to human-centered design, because once you know the whole process involve the human, then you know what exactly are they looking, what you can, and not just the end user, but also the business user. When I talk about human, it's also the business people who are involved in delivering the customer service. So you need to think about them as well. So how do they currently do it, and what is their experience? And then you try to deliver the solution. So go in incremental phase.
If may I say, since for the last maybe 2 years time, I had a very good experience more with speaking and then writing. Especially now, for example, I've been astonished. I was talking with Lloyds Bank. I was very pleased. So, wow, he really understands what I'm saying. He even answered to me correctly. It was like talking to a person, which has been absolutely, for me, an absolute experience. This has never happened when I'm writing. So where is the stage today or using voice speech recognition to better understand the customer? Where do you see this stage, Professor, for example? Are we there?
Yeah, I think we're there. I think the technology exists in like some of the larger organizations like Google. I don't know if you've ever seen one of their videos where someone's trying to make a haircut appointment, and the AI does typical things like these words that they're not real. They're just sort of grunts of a human being to say, yes, I understand you, right? And I think the technology is there. They're just not releasing it now. Sometimes when somebody calls me a telemarketer, I'm like, how do I know you're not an AI? And then they try to convince me, right? So I think the technology is there. I think some of the companies are sort of holding it back. But you know, there's a scam. Everyone's got to know about the scam where basically they record some of your voice, right? And then they call your grandparents who are, you know, or your folks or whatever and say, hey, I'm in a bad trouble. They're using your voice. I need you to send XYZ money to me, right? And that's one of the scams that are out there. My next door neighbor, right, got caught up in that. And he was telling us, you know, the neighborhood, you know, folks, don't do this. Be careful, you know. But the more that we talk about it, the more that, you know, people understand what's happening. Unfortunately, the people who are less tech savvy are going to get sort of swindled, right? And you know, if you think about that, and you know, who's doing that, it's probably some third world country folks. You know, that's the only way they survive in order to pay for food for their family. And you know, there's not a lot of recourse because they're in a country that doesn't have a strong, you know, sort of enforcement, you know, and that's what they're doing. But I think it's important to really understand the whole system, how it's working, right? How do they get your voice? How do they sort of train an AI? How do they know who your grandparents are or who's in your phone, right? Just to understand what's going on. And it's pretty intrusive, to be honest with you. But yeah, you know, this guy who was telling me about it, he's, you know, very smart, brilliant engineer. And, you know, he doesn't even know how they got his voice somewhere. He must have been interacting somewhere online or on a phone call. We don't know. Maybe it's a Telegram channel. I don't think it's Telegram. Maybe it's WhatsApp. I don't even know where his voice would have leaked, right? But anyhow, you know, this is the world that we live in, so we have to be, you know, extra vigilant and careful. The other thing, it kind of comes up with a really cool business idea. If you can identify, oh, someone's mimicking your voice over here, let me tell you about it for $9.99 a month. I'll tell you exactly if your you know, personal, you know, profile has been compromised, right? So, you know, every problem, there's an entrepreneur trying to find the solution. And I think it's important to gear your mind that just because you see a massive problem, think to yourself, wow, if I could solve that, that could really turn into a potential business, right? So, you know, that's the mind frame that, you know, entrepreneurs should be sort of thinking about. The other thing is, the last point I'll make and I'll stop, is that it was mentioned earlier, if you're smart, you're going to be early. And if you're smart, you're going to try to solve too many problems. So you have to sit there and focus down. And it comes to one skill. If you're noticing yourself saying no and no and no, then you're going to have success, because now you're laser focused on what you're doing. If you find yourself saying, yes, I can do that, yes, I can do that, yes, and you're too diversified. So remember, Amazon Bezos was only selling books online first, and he sort of figured that out first. So, you know, stay focused and concentrated. I think it's very hard, especially, you know, if you're always curious and you're super intelligent, you have a lot of energy, whatever it is. So be careful. Try to count how many times you're saying yes to people that you're interacting with. And, you know, you got to sort of limit that. I think that's important too.
So with regards to Mac's question, sorry, are we there yet? So I just got a question for all the viewers here. Do you know when was the first chatbot released? So just type in, and then I'll just tell the story. So, sorry?
No, say to the audience, please type.
Yeah, please type. Okay, yeah. So yeah, just to get them interacting rather than just being bored of listening to us. So the first chatbot was actually developed for psychiatric help. And shall I just reveal the answer? It was in 1963, somewhere at that period. So if you think about the history, when it started to help somebody with psychiatric care, and where we are with ChatGPT. So I leave this question to viewers to answer. So has it been like a radical change? Is it been an evolution where we are? So do you get what I mean? So we already did in 1963, and the first chatbot was called Elisa. So that was the first chatbot. And Dragon speech recognition, Max was saying about speech, voice, it actually, they started selling, actually, the business came after 1990s. So again, if you look into the history, like, we already had this NLP things way earlier, and yeah, 1994. Okay, so way earlier, but with ChatGPT, it has taken a longer time to reach where we are. So yeah, just to add few history to it, Max.
So our question to the audience is, would you have a friend who's just purely AI? Would you want to interact with that person, right, or that AI? And if so, I mean, does anybody right now have a friend that they just talk to their ChatGPT all the time, their best friend, right? I have two daughters, and one of my daughters would be like, a really good app would be some AI that just always encourages you, right? Because the world is so tough and all this peer pressure. So I just want to create an app that just is always positive, giving me encouragement. But I'm just curious, does anybody have that kind of AI friend right now? Does anyone just only talk to an AI?
Would be pretty complicated. I think even boring. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I mean, if we're in that situation where human beings are predominantly just talking to other sort of AI things, then I think we're in a bad position in society, right? You could argue that you are talking to the AI because it's called TikTok or Instagram, because the AI is feeding you stuff for your dopamine to go on, right? And I think that's, I don't know. As a parent, I'm concerned. I think as a tech entrepreneur, I'm like, oh, this is a great marketplace, right? So I'm kind of torn between this, right? I think personally, it's better for my kids to go outside and run around in the grass in the sun than sit and scroll on their phones. But I'm curious to hear what other folks think about that. Maybe
Let's say, meanwhile, we are close to closing our absolutely beautiful, so insightful session. And I really thank you so much for spending so much time with us today. Now, as we talk to founders, as founders on average are pretty young, although the age is growing, but we still talk on average 25, 30, even 20. Doctor, let me start with you. What can be an advice for startup founder how to approach and leverage AI today?
Yeah, I saw somebody asking, there are advisors in some websites. Do we have chat as a advisor? I don't know about that,
Yes.
but I would say you definitely need an advisor.
I will bring on the stage. 1 second. Let me find. Yeah, it's the same guy who said we should write AI. And meanwhile, here we are.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. So that's good. Yeah, but I would definitely say have some advisors, because you are coming new into this field, and AI is still like evolving. You might hear big success stories, but we are not there yet. There's lots of regulations there, and also I can see a lot of questions here about ethical AI, responsible AI. So I actually got into my startup to do responsible AI, to help organizations build AI or innovate AI responsibly from the start, rather than as an add-on, because it's not an add-on. It has to go through the full life cycle. So we need to make sure that you have advisors for various things. And the other thing we don't think in startup environment is about marketing. I think Professor did mention that earlier in this conversation. Start thinking about your market, your target customer. So who is your target customer? Who are you going to market? And start that in the beginning itself, so that once you have the product, you know where to go next, or even before you release, you can get some early adopters in. So think about having advisors, early adopters, involve your users, your stakeholders in this process, and always think about what's the organizational change that you need to bring in order to implement this technology. So those are the 4 key things. And if anybody wants anything, get my LinkedIn and get in touch with me. So thank you, Max, again for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Professor.
Everything that that was previously said, absolutely. These are wonderful, words of wisdom. I wish I knew about it when I started my startup journey. It would have saved a lot of days and hours and weeks or months of frustration, right? I think what you have to think about is it's a journey, and everybody's kind of startup journey is different. Now, there's certain things that you got to do correctly, right, in order to have success. And it all starts out with just if you're going to say something, just do it, right? It's just very simple stuff. And the other thing that you have to understand is that you're setting the tone for this journey as the CEO or the founder. Now, who do you want to attract on your boat? And you're going on this really fun journey. And who do you want to be part of it on your team? Because I think what a lot of startups have to understand is if you want to go fast, you go alone, right? But if you want to go far, you need a team. So, if you really want to build something that's really scalable and really big and whatever it is, you need a really good core team that is there because they want to be there, but they trust each other. A lot of startups fall apart because they have the talented team, but they just fight each other and they knock each other off the boat and over, silly things. And that unfortunately happens quite a bit. Even amongst MBA students, I see them, they're launching off, and then all of a sudden I'm like, how's everything going? And they're like, oh, it didn't work out. XYZ did, went to this company or that company, or they fought each other. I've seen that happen a lot. And so the human emotional aspect of the stress, during a startup sort of gets to a lot of people. So what's very important is you have to keep that relationship going between your co-founders, and you can't let things sort of get involved in breaking that up. Some of the most successful companies that I've seen grow, the co-founders were rock solid even in the worst situation where they were going to lose their business. Nobody sort of gave up, and they stuck together, and all the competition died pretty much, and they were the last people in the boat sort of standing. And then when the market turned around, they got all the business. And so surviving is actually very, very important, especially for startups. So, pick your partners carefully, and, remember that everyone's journey is going to be different. But it's fun, but it's also very challenging. And, don't think it's just all going to be fun and exciting and I'm my own boss and this stuff. There's some, real struggles, especially if you never fired somebody, if you have to downsize, you have to let people go. There's some real pain that's there. The only thing that I could say is, find mentors. I think it's great. Find a community, find other entrepreneurs that, are not necessarily doing what you're doing, but surround yourself with them because they've felt the same emotional roller coaster ride that you're probably going to experience, right? So with that, I'll stop, and thank you very much. This has been an absolute pleasure. And for those who are watching, find me on LinkedIn. I always like to have more friends, right?
Thank you. Before we go, we need to announce our hashtag winner, actually two. And I'm waiting for my team to bring the two winners, and I can announce them. And they will have our first month release for free. So, guys, if you want to bring the first and second, otherwise I will do myself.
That's very cool. That is.
Let me see who is.
Whoa.
Samuel Kennett. Samuel, please get in touch with the team. You will get 1 month free as soon as we release our versus 2.0, which is going to be probably in October, November. You will enjoy it a lot. You have so much to discover and so many tools and features. Professor, Doctor, I can't say thank you too many times to reach, which is my desire. And thank you so much for spending such a long time with us, almost more than 1 hour and a half. And I learned so much. I'm pretty sure everyone watching today learns so much. And I hope to see you again next time. And thanks again. And thank you to everyone who's watching today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.